Welcome to the Brand Intelligence Podcast, the show where we pull back the curtain on some of the world's smartest brands. I'm your co-host, William Tyree, and today our guest is the co-founder of the Pantheon platform, Josh Koenig. Josh, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, William. It's great to be here.
Where in the world are you today?
So I'm coming to you from my sunny home office in New Jersey. So I'm in the New York metro area. I am but a short 40-minute train ride from Penn Station, but my family and I, we relocated to the burbs a couple of years ago. So I'm relearning how to live.
Oh man, I'm a big fan of the New Jersey burbs. I can tell you that. We've got a bunch of friends back there, and my father-in-law, for a while, he lived in Edgewater. Is it working for you in terms of lifestyle and all that?
Yeah, no, it's been great. Overall, like we're close to family here, which is huge, and we have space, and our neighborhood is super nice. Like it was, again, I've lived in big cities for most of my adult life, so it's felt a bit like a fish out of water at first, but there's a block party. You get to go to your neighbors. It's pretty cool.
There you go. All right, we've got East Coast, West Coast today. I'm joining you from LA and in the middle of it, but a nice, quiet neighborhood here. So we'll have the same vibe.
Awesome. Awesome.
Cool. Listen, before we dive into your amazing story, we like to ask all of our guests to give us a theme song. So if you were walking out to do a keynote address today, what is the song that you would choose as your backgrounder?
Oh, so I'm gonna steal one that I saw at one of a friend's wedding. They had a DJ who's doing for speeches, for toasts, they arranged for walk-on music. And this guy had it's a collab track, so I can't remember the name of all the artists, but it's All the Way Up is the
Nothing
name.
can stop me. I'm all the way up. All the way up. All the way up. I'm all the way up.
And it's such a great pump you up vibe. I would definitely take that as my walk-on music.
That's awesome. I also can't summon the artist, but I know that song. And that is
Yeah.
a great one. You can't like it, you don't have a pulse if you're not moving when you hear that song. So for those of you who don't know, what does Pantheon do? And who are your customers?
Pantheon we're a website operations platform, which means essentially we run websites for large scale customers, and we're used by professional website teams. So it's not Wix or Squarespace. These are the consumer brands people know. If you're a larger organization or you have a more ambitious web use case, you're not going to use those consumer tools. And Pantheon's a platform. We're used by tens of thousands of professional website developers and agencies. They're running hundreds of thousands of individual websites on our platform. They're collectively reaching over 1 billion unique monthly visitors. Something like 1 in 8 people on planet Earth will visit a website powered by Pantheon in March. So we do large scale, but what we really help people with that's differentiated is we help them move fast. We help teams really take control of the web experience and drive it forward versus the kind of standard in the industry is often you built a website, you launched it, and you were stuck with it for years. And that's just not a great place to be in today's market. So we help teams keep moving forward, keep moving fast. And then we help larger organizations that don't just have a website or a web team. They have tens or even hundreds of websites and multiple web teams in different geographies with supporting different verticals, manage all that organizational complexity so they don't have to like bring order to that chaos. So that's who we are. And we're really excited about pushing the web forward as a medium that really everyone has access to do their best work in.
100%. As a CMO has been on the agency side and the corporate side, I have definitely felt all the pain that I think Pantheon solves for sure. Let's dig into it a little bit more. I just feel like the theme of the last 2 years for marketing teams and web op teams has been, yes, move fast, but also do more with less, right?
Oh yeah.
And especially with web dev. And I think the irony of that is that for most companies, their website is far and above their most valuable asset, with the exception of obviously their product, right? But when it comes to moving revenue forward, it's absolutely the website. So when we talk about productivity, efficiency, trying to drive that for web ops teams, marketing teams, what does good look like? And specifically, let's say that I'm a company that has 1,000 employees. We're using WordPress, maybe WordPress. We've got a web host. We've got some software to help us keep from getting attacked and taken down all the time. How does Pantheon kind of step in and help us be more efficient and productive?
Yeah, so the what we will help teams do is shift the mindset of how they're using these tools. Like you mentioned WordPress, like it's a great example. WordPress is powers almost half of all websites now on the internet. That's an incredible achievement and a huge long tail of adoption. But the most of those people who've adopted WordPress are small businesses or personal users, right, by volume. And if you're a professional web team, one of the things you'll need to do is figure out how to manage releases to your basically you're treating WordPress not as like the end product that you're using, but the beginning. It's the framework for how you're going to deliver web experiences. And when it's done well, what good looks like is your developers are actually not working on any particular web page, or they're not doing production work to implement things. Like maybe for a very special experience, like you're doing a homepage takeover or you have a super complex or rich campaign, there's exceptions to every rule. But on a day-to-day basis, they're not implementing web pages. They have implemented WordPress so that civilians in the organization can self-serve on building out the pages and publishing content. They're doing that in real time. And your web developers, instead, they've shifted back, shift left in the production process, and they're working on better tools for those people to use downstream. Okay, we need to implement a new type of block. We need to integrate a new piece of MarTech. We need to optimize a point of conversion. They're focused on these higher value activities because the underlying tool set that they've delivered lets most of the organization self-serve for most of its day-to-day needs. And so good is you're publishing in real time, you're running campaigns without being bottlenecked by web development, and your web development resources are focused on an agile process where, whether you run week sprints or 2-week sprints, your mileage may vary, where you have regular repeatable releases that are incrementally improving the user experience, optimizing your website to do its job, whether that's driving conversions or doing e-commerce or whatever the case may be. And also you're able to devote real resources to innovation. Um, and unfortunately, most teams are they're like 0 for 3 on that front. Like they are grinding out content production by like emailing people documents or filing Jira tickets. They don't have tools that anyone can self-serve with. Though, and the web developers will like laugh in your face if you talk about innovation because they're just keeping the lights on. And that's not that's a and as you pointed out, the website is, or your websites, that's your owned asset. That is your most valuable piece of property on the internet. That is how your most of your touch points are going to happen. And if you're stuck in this very static mode of operation, there's very limited upside you can drive through that. And it's just an unfortunate that is still status quo in the industry.
It really is. It really is. It's amazing too. What sometimes I hear about things and I'm thinking, what year is it? Just last week, I was talking to a peer, and their content manager on the page was taking. I think when writing for, you can write for humans, you can write for Google bots and things like that, but in their normal process, all the things that you would normally do for, say, like a news item or blog post, like alt tags, things like that, those things were actually still being shipped to the web dev team to do. And it's just, oh man, no, those folks are too talented and too specialized, I think, to be doing that. So I love the fact that you've got, it sounds like part of your mission is really enabling those folks who are non-developers to really move fast. That's, I think, like still unfortunately a really big bottleneck for a lot of marketing teams.
Oh, 100%. And I think to be fair, it's not easy. It is hard.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
complex. And unless you are lucky enough to be a brand new company that just got born in the past 2 or 3 years, the reality of your situation is you are dealing with a brownfield situation. There is legacy stuff that probably made sense 10 years ago. Made even if been like super smart 5 years ago. That doesn't make any sense now. And I think organizationally things change pretty rapidly online, and also the imperative of who's driving this train has shifted over the past decade for sure, but even increasingly in the past 3-4 years from IT to marketing. And so you just have a lot of moving parts, and I think there's a rising generation of marketing leaders that are more comfortable taking ownership of this problem. And I think that's one of the trends that I'm most excited about, because there are people they're coming into roles where they have decision making authority, where they control budget, and they're saying like, no, we can't keep doing it this way. We have to find a better path forward, because this is, at the end of the day, if I can't really leverage this channel, I can't succeed. And they know what good looks like because maybe they've experienced it as a consumer before. And like, why can't we have just as good tools here at our professional job?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I love the sound of that. Speaking of things that are, I'd say, like pushing down on marketing teams, web ops teams, but also I think pushing all of us forward in ultimately, hopefully, a good way. How is AI affecting the creation and maintenance of websites? And I say that this is a conversation I think that we've all been having for years, actually. What's next? What's happening? And I say that in the context of knowing that there are tons of marketing leaders out there who their teams are already using a ton of different AI tools for various things, right? Lots of individual contributors. Maybe they get lucky and they find like a few centralized tools that they're using for their team. But what's happening at the top level from, I think it's a C-level initiative on down is, hey, everybody needs to have an AI first philosophy. How are we actually using these, especially generative technologies, to move us all forward? So, what's your view of this when it comes to web dev and all the things that Pantheon is?
So there's a few different layers I think that AI is hitting at and also missing at, to be honest. So I having experienced it myself directly, there is tremendous utility for developers themselves with the AI assisted copilot approach to creating things that still need to be expressed through code. You can have the copilots do the boring part of setting up an implementation and helping craft the right framework for what you're trying to build, which is actually saves a ton of time. But there are also very real risks. Like I saw there's been reporting coming out recently that code that was generated with AI assistance is far more likely to have security vulnerabilities. And in part because the AI doesn't really know what it's doing. It's still very sophisticated autocorrect, which is great if your prompt is mock up a standard object oriented plugin scaffold for a WordPress extension, right? But if you then go to, and also write me the database query I need to get the stuff, and you don't double check exactly what's coming back there, is that the right query? Does it have a SQL injection vulnerability? Like the AI isn't smart at that level. So it's you got to trust but verify and give it the right level of trust it with the right level of problems. My CTO David Strauss has said this 2 years ago, and it lives rent free in my head. AI is not artificial intelligence. AI, the current generation and the breakthroughs we've seen are artificial interns. You need to think about what you would, if you want to actually just trust it, what would you trust an intern to do alone? Some things, maybe, but not a lot. But also, artificial interns could be very useful. If you had a lot of interns that worked around the clock, like you could get a lot of stuff done. So I think there's stuff there on the code side. I've seen it work. In terms of how it's impacting the web, gosh, it's really tricky because I think we've seen a lot of people are individually getting undeniable utility out of generative content models to help with creating content, right? Like I've used Midjourney to spice up some conference presentations with like imagery, which is fun. And I know a lot of people find if you're drafting long form content, if you can get a junky first draft from Chat GPT, that'll accelerate your process quite a bit. And that to me is it's really a more broad question about how do we be creative in a world where generative content exists. But we've also seen these cautionary tales. Like I was just following up on something. This was like a viral thing back in December where some guy was like all over Twitter with being like, I just pulled off an SEO heist. And I don't know
Right.
if you're familiar with the story, but what he did was he went through a competitor's sitemap, turned that into a whole bunch of prompts to go to ChatGPT, generated a bunch of content, and put it all online on a microsite that was designed to like essentially capture all the organic SEO of a competitor. And if you go back and look at that person's company's page rank now, they're Google crushed them.
Yeah.
Like they're not the cost of actually doing that kind of stunt was tremendous. And I've seen this before because the incentive from the search engines and other people who are their role in the internet ecosystem is to direct people's attention, like they can't let inauthentic content win, otherwise they're out of a job,
Right.
right? You have to really strike this balance of figuring out how to be creative with a new generation of technology, which is exciting, but also maintaining your authenticity. And in a world where it's easier and easier to generate B or C grade content on any topic, how do you stand out? You've got to have something special. You've got to have some kind of insight. You've got to have real value. And I have very mixed feelings for how things are playing out currently, because there is quite obviously, as a consumer of the internet, more low quality content available than ever before. And that's not a coincidence. But I still think that just means there's a greater opportunity for everybody to differentiate by having stuff that's really valuable.
Yeah. Wow. Said there's so many good things in what you just said. First of all, I'm stealing artificial intern because I think that's probably the most apt description I've ever heard. It's amazing. And it's a perfect question. What would you trust an intern to do? And I think that goes for design, developers, content creators, the whole thing. We've all seen lawsuits come crashing down because they'd become suddenly over reliant on AI to look up case law and identify it, not realizing perhaps, or maybe not doing enough due diligence that you have to verify because the AI will make stuff up if it doesn't know the answers. And I see it do this daily, actually. So I think it's very easy for your average COO, CEO. And by the way, there's some great CEOs and COOs out there that really understand where the technology is. I think it's very easy for them to do what they've been doing for the last year to say, hey, why can't we 10x or 100x our output based on this? But just like interns, like you're talking about, everything has to be looked at. Everything has to be analyzed. So yeah, like you, I feel like bringing a healthy level of skepticism to everything is great, but at the end of the day, it's right now, it's just another tool, and it's a great one. It's a really great tool as long as you, I think, control the output.
Yeah, yeah, I think there's a ton of utility in what exists now. You just have to set your expectations appropriately. And and that's hard to do when you are in the middle of a hype cycle. And everyone
Yeah.
knows we're in the middle of a hype
Oh,
cycle.
yeah.
Like, no one's going to deny that. So that makes it a challenge to, like, keep your feet firmly planted on the ground. And it's especially challenging in a world where what happens in hype cycles is people get FOMO, right? You get executive C-suite FOMO that we're missing out, and that drives people to pressure folks to deliver results, and then under pressure to deliver results, it's harder to make sober decisions. And you can see how, in retrospect, cases I've seen where, especially in industries that are under tremendous pressure, like you've seen this in media, where people are starting to auto generate content and attribute it to fictitious journalist bios or other things, and that is such a mistake. And it's but you can see how the pressures of the current environment could lead someone to make that mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I'd say it feels like there's a certain level person in organizations right now that is firmly in the hype cycle. And then there's some creators, I think, that are, to coin the Gartner phrase, they're in the trough of disillusionment right now. But what is cool to see, though, is if you back up a level and not talk about the stuff that's getting all the hype, right? Generative. It's clear, though, that marketing teams are actually, I think, finally really embracing in workflow the previous level, previous areas of AI. So, like across our platform, even adjusting for growth in customer base and things like that, we saw year over year, our customers create about 54% more content than they had the year before. Certainly, some of that is generative AI and all that. But we can also see that they're finally, I think, embracing technologies, AI related technologies that have matured enough. For example, this podcast, the transcription is going to be just about perfect. Where 2 years ago, that was the kind of thing where it was useful to know some linguistic PhD candidates in some part of the world to actually check the AI's work, right? So there's a lot of things like that where I think AI is really useful, and then these other areas are just kind of getting proven out and evolving and maturing.
Yeah, I think that you have the ability, again, it's assistance. It's the ability to delabor certain things.
Yeah,
And like that, those numbers that you cited, that sounds like real, authentic, maintainable growth. Like, we've produced 50% more content on average,
wow,
right? That's an achievable lift that I could stand behind. Where people are looking for 10x or forget 100x. It's okay. What are the odds that's going to work out well for you? Maybe you're in an existential crisis, and the only thing you can do is shoot for the moon. But at least acknowledge that's what you're doing, because if you shoot for the moon and it doesn't come out, you get busted.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but I do see that. Yet some things that I'm seeing also are, you mentioned transcription. The quality of translation is also, it's not, certainly not perfect, but it's getting better. especially if you can add, again, if you can still add a human overlay, but they're not literally transcribing word for word, they're just spot checking and doing corrections on something that's already been translated. And the reality is that so many organizations, they need to, whether this is communicating literally the same content in different languages, or it's getting the same value proposition across to different personas or different verticals, there is the need to speak specifically to an audience. And this is gets back to the right way, I think, to leverage some of these technologies is that the big, because we run websites, everyone wants to do website personalization. They're always talking about it, but it's also very frequently next year we're going to do website personalization. Or they had a big effort and it didn't end as well as they thought because they underestimated the amount of work involved in creating variant content.
Right.
And we're excited. We're like working with our friends at Google on some things around this to try to essentially address that question, which brings AI to bear from two directions, machine learning to bear from two directions. One is, what is the content that's most valuable and important? You probably have a bunch of cases from this in your own ecosystem where just bringing people visibility on what content is really moving the needle with whom, without that kind of analysis, the workload is personalize everything. And that never happens. That's never going to happen. Too much work. So how
Yeah.
can you bring analysis to bear to identify what like the 20% of your touch points that are going to be delivering 80% of the win if you could sharpen them? And then for who? Like what audiences, what do they care about? And if you've got generalist content team, maybe generative AI is a way to get the creative juices flowing. Again, to get that first draft written so that you can so it doesn't take you a week to come up with the alternate message. You can get something up that afternoon. Like that sort of speed of motion is something that I think as we settle into this and to borrow again the Gardner phrase, we're going to climb the slope of enlightenment. I feel
Yeah.
it's gonna feel a lot more like that than it is going to be like it's gonna be real. It's going to be grounded and authentic, not necessarily flash in the pan.
Yeah. That resonates a lot and super exciting to hear about that potential, the outcome of that initiative you mentioned with Google in terms of personalization, because I think that's been one of those pain points. When you hear stats like Scott Brinker puts out, and I'm gonna misquote him probably, but I think the latest study was
He's used to it. It's okay.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But your average MarTech stack maybe gets 20 to 30% utilized or something like that, which it's probably even lower. Those technologies on audience personalization, things like, hey, we want to greet visitors from Portugal in their native tongue when they come to the website with this content, things like that. I think those have been some of the areas where, because of some of the difficulty that I think you are alluding to, those tools I think have tended in the past to get underutilized. So that would be amazing if it was the kind of thing where we could actually really all do it, because not only would we be all successful in our businesses, but we would have, I think, be able to offer the kind of experiences that we would want ourselves. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then again, I think it's a that low percentage utilization of the technology. Look, I try not to do this with my company, and I think we have a pretty good and responsible go-to-market organization, but nobody's perfect. And I think that the problem is that we are so often vendors are out there selling technology as a solution when again, technology is a enabler. The solution is actually a changed way of working for your team or a changed way to deliver something to a customer or a prospect. And the tech itself, you can turn it on, but it doesn't make the change happen of its own accord. And so I think you get into these cases where people, not the sort of pejorative lingo is they're buying shiny objects. And then you've got your Martech stack that's like very sparkly up on the wall, but is it moving the needle? Is it well implemented? Is it delivering a better customer journey? And if the more pieces you have in that, the more likely it is that you over consumed on tools and under invested in the implementation.
Yeah, completely. That resonates. Let's talk a little bit about, for those who don't know, Pantheon Intelligence Bank are working together in a partnership. And I'd love to hear from your end. What's the role of digital asset management in web ops as you see it?
Oh, it's super important because again, as I was talking about at the beginning, one of the things that I think web ops mindset does for people is it's the idea of this shift left notion for where people are applying their value. But like that end goal of the content creators in the organization are empowered to self-serve and do move forward in real time. In certain organizations and industries, you don't want that because you have regulatory standards and you need checks and balances, but you still want that to be fast if it can. That means giving those people the right tools to do their job, right? And so there's a fundamental way in which we help, which is, hey, you want a well implemented content management system that you can evolve without breaking, and where you can be responsive to the needs of your editorial or your content team and treat them as first class users. And in an organization that has a lot of digital assets, right? That's why there's a whole software category for digital asset management, because those people need a library to pull those things from. Like the modern content management systems, again, we mentioned WordPress as a good example. Like probably certainly when it got started and even 10 years ago, people would sit down, crack open WordPress and start writing. That's not how it's used today for the most part, especially in a professional context. People are using the content management system as a digital composition layer. They are pulling in data, assets, and new copy and new content that's probably drafted in Google Docs, and they're combining it in this place to actually deliver a new piece that can go out on the web, or a new landing page that they can build a campaign around. And so the fundamental value of having a well organized, official, canonical, you can trust it library of assets for people to pull into that work is tremendous, right? Because if you're a real small scale in a small business, you don't really need that because you only have so many photos you're going to use or whatever for your campaigns. But if you're a bigger, if there's different teams producing these different types of content, they need that kind of backbone to organize their work together. And so I think, and in particular, as you're thinking about assets that are canonical, you want them to show up in multiple places and actually be the same thing. That if you've got, once you start to think about multiple channels and like whomst among us, everybody's got multiple channels because you've got your owned property of your website, you've got social feeds, you've got email. Like you need a way to coordinate across those different channels with your assets.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really great. One of the reasons that I feel lucky actually to be a CMO here is because it actually solves a lot of problems that my teams have had over the years. Just like what you're talking about. You have multiple teammates, multiple divisions interacting in one place. Compliance has to get involved, legal has to get involved, making sure that those things are like all approved, that they can go out so that your web team doesn't have to think twice about making sure circle back in like Slack, God forbid, email, things like that to make sure that they have the right version. You actually have a disclaimer engine instead of your creative director being a human disclaimer engine. Uh, things like that.
Yeah,
So
but I love that because one of the taglines I use conversationally a lot is like where we you want to move fast without breaking things, because it's cool to be Mark Zuckerberg and say move fast and break things at Facebook, but nope, you don't get to do that if you're the web team. You don't get to break things. You get fired. And so tools like Intelligence Bank are so critical to giving people the confidence to move fast, the confidence to play offense in their role. And then I also love that's the reason why it's such a great combination is you guys have invested in these really thoughtful CMS implementations for WordPress and for Drupal and for others, to where again, like you want to leverage Intelligence Bank, you're the next question you're asking is how exactly does this fit into my content strategy? What are the use cases I specifically have, the customers I'm trying to reach? You're not spending 90 days just trying to get the plumbing hooked up, right? So that's actually, once that's all done, people forget about it, but that can be a huge impediment. And one of the reasons for that Scott Brinker quote is again, people, if the plumbing isn't already like fit for purpose, that can end up sucking up all of your energy. And that's just not a risk with our platforms together.
yeah, 100%. And it's interesting. Last year, we were sponsoring a RevOps conference, and one of the speakers, I think she said it best. She said, basically, if there is no plumbing, that's like the part of our stack that's going to shrink, right? Because there's just no room in today's world for having your team context switch between all these siloed solutions. So for me, just personally, as a lifelong marketer, just the ability to move seamlessly between one of them and effectively have one great solution that not only adds value for marketing, but for everybody or almost everybody in your org, I think that's the holy grail.
Yeah, you want these things to tie together. You want them to be as seamless as possible. You don't want people to just be like essentially human copy and paste machines between different contexts. Like that's clearly not high value. And yeah, you want people to like be able to get stuff out the door that's high quality and to do it quickly. Like we did a survey last year and 80% of marketing leaders, this is like we did it through Hanover, so it's like a legit quantitative scale research outfit. They got like 450 responses. 80% of marketing leaders reported that they could not get a change to their website live in under a week. And we're not talking like massive changes. Like this is where people are at is there it's unfortunate. The state of the status quo is people can't really move that fast. And I guess the good news is if you can or can change that, then you're going to have an advantage.
Oh, completely. It's interesting how, yes, you need the right tools, but you also need, I think you need an organization and a culture that is set up to move fast without, yes, breaking things. Last year, I remember being in one of those situations where I had a marketing team that could spin up even a massive webinar and get like 500 people to join that thing in about 2 weeks.
Wow.
That's what it took. Talking to like one of our partner companies, for them, that would have been 6 months. They said, there's just no way we can do that. It would take 6 months. And I don't understand how companies can afford to work to not be fast. Right. I feel like those that can't are unfortunately going to get left behind, which actually I'd love to ask you a little bit more. Talk a little bit about the increase in output that we've been seeing. What are you seeing in your customer base? Like, are websites in general, are they getting more media rich? Are they getting larger? What are some of the big trends that you're seeing among your customers? Obviously, we know they're moving faster, but what's driving in other layers to that?
Yeah, I think you have so I think there's two high level trends that are worth calling out. One is the quality bar for web experiences is going up. And that is in part driven by the fact that more for finally in the US, this has been true in the developing world forever, but in the US, mobile web browsing is now the majority of web browsing. And the cool thing about like modern web technology, I come from a development background, so I totally nerd out on all this. But like you basically have the web stack is now the best and most widely distributed stack for delivering software experiences. Right? Think about like we're recording this in a tab in Chrome right now
Yeah,
because you use the web to run software, and the
right.
quality of experience you have with a good software UI is now the quality bar for a good website UI. What is a website and a web app? That's always been a fuzzy kind of line of demarcation, and that uncanny valley is only getting more and more flattened out. And so what we see here is people who are looking to engage, particularly if you're looking to engage a younger audience, digital natives. You're looking to engage people on their phone. You're not targeting people sitting behind a desk in front of a workstation. You're trying to get someone who saw a notification pop up on their phone. They tap the notification. They're not thinking, "Oh, I'm going to the web to find out what's up." They're thinking, "I tapped the thing and then something else happened." And the quality of that something else that happened needs to be at the level of a native mobile app. Otherwise, they're gone. And then in conjunction with that, although it's a separate trend, these things reinforce each other. The people are shifting budgets back into making content or making experiences, which is interesting. And part of this is being driven by the fact that you can no longer as effectively or as aggressively micro target audiences through paid demand gen. As like device and regulatory standards for privacy continue to become more consumer friendly, the big tech platforms can't do as much as they used to do. And so like you saw this knock like a couple billion out of Facebook's market cap with I think it was the iOS 13 update where they basically said no individual device tracking. And one of the results of that is, and I've heard people talk about this, okay, we used to be able to buy our audience. Now we're getting back to having to earn our audience. And how do you earn an audience? You create something that's authentically interesting to them. And then maybe you can juice it by getting an influencer to help you get the ball rolling, but it has to actually be good. Otherwise, it's not going to get passed around. It's not going to get shared, and you're not going to get those people to engage with your content. So I think some of then these things start coming together really well, where you get like this zippy tool set for making really amazing software grade web experiences rising over here, and the fact that people actually are like willing to put budget into innovative creative work over here, and some cool stuff is coming out of that. And I'm excited to see where that leads with the industry because I think it's gonna drive. I think it's gonna drive a lot of innovation over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I absolutely love all that, and I think going back a couple minutes to what you were saying too about how much happens in a web tab today. It's so true. I'm doing a training tomorrow on for some of our reps so that they can engage with our buyers in real time. It's like just another kind of layer on top of what we're already doing. That's yet another case where I'm saying, hey, don't download the for that. It's all going to happen in this case, like a Chrome browser tab. In fact, the experience is much better there. So I'm there with you. I think that's a really great trend and absolutely for mobile too. Do you feel like in that shift to mobile, you're still seeing you still feel like we're for people making truly large purchasing decisions that the desktop experience essentially is still rules the roost, or do you feel like even that is shifting to mobile?
That's a great question. I think the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed yet.
Okay.
And some of that's appropriate because different customers in different industries. There are we do a lot of work with like B2B and not like B2B SaaS companies, like B2B traditional companies. And in that world, yeah, you don't want to embarrass yourself on a mobile device, but you're trying to get people that are on a lengthy buyer's journey that involves lots of research. And that's a different audience than trying to get maybe like sharpen the contradictions, like Gen Z folks to engage with your brand, right? Those are really different use cases, which with different levels of emphasis. But I do think the in my career, I've been doing the web for almost 25 years. In my career, the conversation has evolved from responsive to mobile first, but it was still like a legacy approach, just like prioritized, like simplifying the content so that it would look good on a smaller screen to like again this next generation. I don't quite have the pithy phrase for it, and I'm so frustrated that the crypto bros stole web 3.0, but it's the version of the web where the user experience bar, the quality bar for user experiences is set by native mobile apps, or frankly where the easiest way to ship a native mobile app is just to package it around a little hidden browser. Like
Mhm.
that's just the way people do it now, and that is a game changer in terms of the amount of interactivity and the richness of the experience you can get. You have to go back to the heyday of the Flash era to have stuff that was this cool happening on the web, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Cool. So I just want to say, like, I love the Pantheon brand. It's fantastic. I think it's just like what you have done with it. It does evoke trust and authority, and obviously done a great job attracting partners. You've got like lots and lots of amazing partner agencies on your website, which are fantastic. I love to ask every guest, what's a common myth about brand strategy that you feel like people need to know?
A common myth, gosh, I don't know how common this is, but I feel like I see it an awful lot, which is that you you need someone else to tell you. Again, you do need to do research. You do need to listen, especially listen to your customers. But I often find people just don't have the confidence in their own essence and their own story, and you got to find that within, because no amount of focus group data or surveying will give you a visceral sense of who you are and what you're about. You can't replace one for the other. I think you have to find that inner conviction in what your brand truly and authentically is, and then make sure it's not crazy. Make sure that it resonates and it's validated in the market. That it starts inside. And I think a lot of times people approach the challenge of brand and they don't. They're like, and I'm sympathetic to this, especially if you're new to a role. What do you know? And so you look for an outside in approach. But I often see that ends up with stuff that is it's just bland and it's not very authentic and it doesn't stand out in the market because it ends up being very middle of the road.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it's interesting because there's no shortage of ways even to do a digital focus group nowadays, right?
Oh yeah.
There's so many opportunities to do that. And I do think that it has their time and place, but I agree with you. I think one of the best questions you ask your marketing team is for every exercise. Okay, hopefully you're making whatever you're selling, whatever you're trying to get out of in the world. very clear to understand. You're not getting too clever or too quippy with it. You're clearly articulating value. But I think the best question for me is how is it different? And that was like at the beginning of this conversation. You told me immediately how you were different. So I agree with you. That's really important. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was gonna say that, yeah, it's again, it comes down to authenticity, and then you get, like brand can't cover for if your business model isn't that great or your product isn't super great, but
Completely.
ideally, you've got all 3 of those things working together, and then you have a really true story, and there's if you've got a true story, there's a the upside is unlimited.
100%. Listen, before we close, anything else that you feel like marketing web ops teams need to know that we haven't touched upon?
The big one that we didn't talk about because we were talking about all the other awesome innovation, and it's related to the privacy stuff, but it's not the same, is the slow but sure death of the third-party cookie
Yeah.
it is upon us.
Yeah.
I remember I was at, like, a summit that Google threw for CMS technology makers back in 2019 when they first announced this, and they said, "We'll do it this year," and they've pushed it back every year, but they're starting. Like,
Yeah.
Privacy Sandbox is shipped, and they're starting to strip this stuff away, and all the focus on this conversation has been around what it means for the advertising market, or not all, but the majority of the focus has been around what it means for the ad tech and publishers. It's going to be a buzzsaw for martech because they fundamentally operate on the same technical bases, and so if you people are already live with the fact that somewhere between 10% to a third of their traffic is invisible because people install privacy extensions. That number is going to go up to 50% or more. And you got to get ready for it, right? Because you're going to need a first party data strategy, a first party cookie strategy, and a way to wrestle with the fact that you're not going to be able to solve stuff by piling more tags on.
I am right there with you. We just put out a content trends report. I think the cookie apocalypse was like maybe on page one or page two. For years, I think some of the best brands in the world have said, hey, we need to act like publishers, right?
Hmm.
I would say and there's all kinds of reasons to do that. But I think now you really have a technological reason to do that. Because if you don't have those one-to-one relationships with your buyers and you get that through great experiences that you offer, whether it's whatever you're making, great product tours, or they are videos or articles or whatever you're doing there, you have to actually own it because boy, I think that the third party, like you're saying, it's yeah, for me as a CMO, we're already seeing some lack of visibility in some areas in advertising, but I think you're right that it impacts the entire organization.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, the trend, these things always swing back and forth, but I think the trend that we're on, and clearly it's going to be for the next few years, is it's towards owned assets and earned engagement, right? Doesn't mean you're not going to be paying for demand gen. It doesn't mean you won't be promoting stuff. It doesn't mean that there aren't going to be like social platforms and other external places where you need to show up. But if you want it to drive your business, you're going to have to own it and earn it.
Absolutely. All right. Listen, thank you so much for joining me, Josh. This was absolutely awesome. I always learn a lot from our guests, but that goes triple for you today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me on. This was a really fun conversation.